And now it's time for Fabulous Film and Friends. This week on Fabulous Film and Friends, we're going back to the late 1950s, early 1960s, when men smoked heavily, recklessly enjoyed sophisticated cocktails, and liked their women the way they wore their suits, skinny and tight. A time when spies and Cold Wars were the talk of the town, and all the cool cats admired two preeminent and influential thrillers. We're talking 1959's North by Northwest, directed by the Master of Suspense himself, Alfred Hitchcock, and starring Carey Grant, Eva Marie Saint, James Mason, Jessie Royce Landis, Ned Glass, and Marin Landau, against 1963's Charade, directed by Stanley Donen, and starring Carey Grant again, Audrey Hepburn, Walter Matthau, James Coburn, Ned Glass again, and the mighty George Kennedy. I'm your host, Gino Caputi, and joining me this week are two suave millionaires, men's men in their own right, David Johnson DMD and author-producer George Young. Welcome, gentlemen.
Thank you.
Before we break out the martinis, the synopses. North by Northwest follows the exploits of slightly mild-mannered ad agency owner Roger Thornhill, who's mistaken for a government agent and abducted. After that, he's thrown into a world of shadowy art dealers and fast-talking femme fatale special agents who'll do anything to protect and advance their positions. Roger's only way out is to follow the trail of mystery to its presidential conclusions. In Charade, Regina Lambert, a soon-to-be divorcee, quickly finds out she's a widow whose ex-husband has hidden a fortune by 1963 standards. With both the government and four of her husband's former associates following her to find the money, she falls hopelessly in love with one of them, though his identity is never quite known. All right, George Young, this was your idea. Lay it on me. Which film do you prefer?
Well, I would be lying if I said I didn't prefer North by Northwest, which is not only my favorite Hitchcock film, but might be my favorite film of all time. I recently saw a big screen 60th anniversary showing in Florida, and I have to say the cinematography and the movie itself holds up extremely well. I did rewatch Charade last week after you agreed to do this, and it's a little bit clunkier than North by Northwest. I was jotting a few things down as to why I thought that was, but I haven't come to any complete conclusions except that I really feel like North by Northwest is a masterstroke in film production and direction. And there's, as I like to say about the occasional film, I don't think there's a wasted scene in it. And I cannot make the same claim about Charade.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't really think about it. I mean, I'm too dazzled just by the whole 60s vibe suddenly. So I wasn't really thinking about wasted scenes in one movie or another. But let me talk to Dave first. Dave, which film do you prefer?
Well, I agree with George. I mean, North by Northwest is my favorite Hitchcock film. And just epic Hollywood scenes in cinematography the airplane scene, that's just a classic.
Sure.
However, who doesn't love Audrey Hepburn?
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was mesmerized by her in her 60s outfits. So, but better film for me. I like North by Northwest better. So,
Yeah. No, it's just a more resonant film, and it still holds up now. I mean, I think if I was going to go into the deeper meaning of it all, I think both films are giving this hint of you can't quite trust what's being told to you. And hence Charade ending with a husband she doesn't, or a lover or whatever, she doesn't quite know what his name is. We don't even, so forget the government, forget all these that you believe in. She can't even, and not only does she not trust the man she loves, she doesn't want to. So I guess they both are precursors to today. But yeah, for sure, North by Northwest. I don't know, George. Maybe you know more than that. I can't. It's just not my area of expertise. That's why Alex should be here. I just don't know of many films before then that really were. Well, maybe The Manchurian Candidate. And what was that, 61, 62? That where you
It-
weren't quite trusting the government.
Yeah, and you would have to wait. I think you're right. I think it was a couple of years later for Manchurian Candidate, and you would have to wait for that what appeared to be some sort of abundance of movies where that was the theme. It started with a parallax view in the late
Hmm.
60s, and
Right.
then I kind of think it hit its crescendo with 3 Days of the Condor,
Mm-hmm.
which I think was 75 or 76. So you
I
had
think
about, is
75. I think
that
so.
right?
Which I
Okay.
just saw maybe in the last year. I'd
Oh,
never seen it before. Like
you had,
I went
oh,
through. I went. You know, we could have probably added that to the mix had I thought about it. But I had only just recently seen it. So yeah, for that, for anybody cares. But what do you make of it? I mean, Dave, you think I'm right? You think that this is sort of like the first taste of disillusionment? So 63, I didn't know what month it came out, but 63, right as Kennedy's getting killed, we have this
right.
film. So Manchurian Candidate, I think, is 62.
I think that's right.
Yeah.
While you're chatting with Dave, I'll just take a quick look here. So,
Yeah. I'm one of those
Yeah.
podcasters who avoids research because who needs the truth, right?
right.
No, you just
Especially
trust. You just yeah, you just trust the government what they
what is
tell you.
truth? Exactly. I trust. And I'll
No,
tell
I
you,
mean,
this Chat GPT, they get a lot of their they get. I was discussing a Star Trek movie with Chat GPT, and they get their facts wrong.
Mhm.
So yeah,
Wow.
it's very you can't trust any of these entities.
was the fact that William Shatner's not that great of an actor? Was that the
No, no,
fact?
no. They
Oh,
just got their date. They got their dates wrong and their facts totally
Wow.
wrong, like
oh,
100%
really?
wrong. That I'm like, and I had to say that is wrong. You are wrong. You have to update your data. Like, my
Wow.
apologies, Dave. Yeah. Anyway, I digress. Yeah, I mean, I'll just say North by Northwest is the more resonant film because it really keeps you off balance. I think obviously we'll get into director, but Hitchcock was the master of suspense for a reason. It's
Mhm.
just a more eerie, well thought out movie than
Yeah.
I think Charade is. So
Um,
Hitchcock's shots are better. His
yep.
mood is stronger. Everything's better
Mhm.
in North by Northwest.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
Charade almost feels like it's capitalizing on it. It's got Cary Grant,
Mhm.
but it doesn't have the same sort of disturbing depth to it,
Yeah.
if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I will, I have to give it credit though. When I first saw it, not obviously this time around, I didn't, all the signs were pointing to Walter Matthau being, ultimately the quote unquote bad guy. And when I first saw the movie, it's got to be 30 years ago, maybe even more, um, I never picked up on that. But now that I, worked in the industry and have studied some movies to a great deal, it was pretty obvious if you look at arcs and tropes of filmmaking. But maybe that's the beauty of it. If it comes out in 63, you have a slightly less sophisticated audience, and I
Yeah,
think that would really reach out and surprise people. So maybe that was part of the charm that has worn off since, people are now so inundated with
right.
double intentions,
Sure.
distractions, oh, the bad guy's over here, the bright shiny object. And you immediately are, I think, would be maybe more so drawn to Walter Matthau as the hidden dial, the one who got away from
Yeah.
the original foursome.
Yeah. And it's
Yeah.
following this theme of this sort of fabricated life, you know. So
Mhm.
he goes into the office of the
Yeah, right.
the UN and
Yep.
all that, and it just sort of, or not the UN, but the CIA, or wherever his office is, I forget.
Oh,
But
the ambassadors or the diplomatic residence in Paris, the American embassy.
right,
Yeah,
right. So
right.
it sort of follows this form of the same I don't know if it's ripping off the plot of North by Northwest, but it's definitely in the same vein where occupying these sort of abandoned places or buildings and taking advantage of the
Oh,
situation.
right, because of
So
the
yeah,
yeah,
because the same thing. They're very similar films, and I don't I you know you we didn't add this to the pile of films we're reviewing, but Arabesque is what started this whole interest in on my part. I just said, hey, I didn't know Gregory Peck and Sophia Loren were ever in a movie together,
all
and
right.
I checked it out. But it's the same thing going on, and it's also Stanley Donen. So obviously he hit pay dirt with Charade, and
Mm.
then a couple years later makes just sort of a pale rehash of it in a sense.
Mhm.
But obviously Hitchcock got the ball rolling.
Could
So
be.
it's like, I guess it's like in today's equivalent is the Born Identity, and then all these just what American Assassin, all these just sort of rip-offs of the Born Identity. So it's or
Okay.
just movies or Pulp Fiction in the '90s. It sets a trend. So definitely we're seeing a North by Northwest sort of as the catalyst of like, whoa, we haven't seen this before, and then all these sort of copycats, and then it sort of delves and evolves into James Bond, I guess. You
Uh,
know,
okay. All right. Yeah. You know, you have an intentional male protagonist,
yeah,
with North by Northwest, and I guess to a certain degree, you have quote unquote the wrong man. I
yeah,
mean,
yes,
I don't know. It's not quite the same thing for Charade, but there's certainly an element to it that
right,
he's not who somebody thinks he is.
right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, and there is this sort of behind the scenes of what do we believe in? What is obviously Hitchcock couldn't go under the idea of that the government was bad, but he doesn't go so far as to get jingoistic about it. I mean, Eva Marie Saint is let's to call a spade a spade. She's a bit of a whore, and she's like that's it's kind of interesting for 59. I mean, again, I have a quaint sort of view informed by Leave It to Beaver and all the 50s shows that
Mm,
I watched. So I'm forgetting that in the 50s people were smart and they understood subtext. And in
yeah.
fact, I think that informs the dialogue. That's what makes this dialogue so good is because they aren't so overt.
Mm,
And so you're in,
okay.
whoa, this is really risque dialogue that's being uttered between these two, and it's because there are they have to work within the parameters of censorship and
Mm,
public outrage, so it makes it better. The dialogue is just cracklingly good. Ernest Lehman, who
yeah.
this guy could write. I mean, it's like, man, this really is, and it's funny. I'd seen it years ago for a film class, and then
Mm,
I always liked it and had in my mind that I liked it, but I
mm.
just forgot how flat out funny it is. Like, yeah, this is really funny. You know, Thoughts, Dave? Do you find it funny, or is you just
No, there
like
were
that
some funny
suspense?
parts. I mean, for me, the suspense was the best part. There were some funny parts. I felt the parts that were funny in North by Northwest weren't forced, whereas in Charade, it felt they were
Yeah,
fun. It felt a little forced.
yeah.
I don't know if that makes sense.
No, it does. I
Sure.
Yeah,
completely agree. For
yeah.
one thing, Audrey Hepburn, almost like with Arabesque, she should have switched parts. With Sophia
Oh,
Loren.
Sophia Loren.
Not that we're talking about Arabesque, but I just felt like Audrey Hepburn. I don't quite buy as the bored housewife who's sort of hunting for a man.
Mhm.
Just I just it seemed a little odd to me. Like I couldn't get past it. Like
Well,
who doesn't love Audrey Hepburn? She's movie stars. You talk about Gregory Peck or Cary Grant. They just don't. I mean, I know I sound like some old doofus codger. Just they don't make stars like they used to. But I just look at movie stars then, and that's sort of like this new appreciation because we've been watching whoever we've been watching. Chris Evans and Robert Downey Jr.
right,
and
right.
all the people who've passed as the big stars today. And it's just like, yeah, there's just no comparison. I
Mhm.
mean, there's just none. I mean, look at Cary Grant, and
Yeah.
it's
Well,
just
and to be fair, I felt he looked okay. I'm just going off of his presence in North by Northwest.
yeah,
It was like Cary Grant. He was a little aged. The
yeah,
grays were showing in
sure,
Charade, um, and I agree. For me, Aubrey Hepburn was like it was so a little over the top when she was the way she was acting in this like. so naive. I don't know if that makes sense in Charade,
Yeah.
but I was just mesmerized by her eyes, so I didn't really
Yeah.
care.
Right.
I mean, I'm just like it's all,
She
Audrey
felt
Hepburn.
slightly miscast to me. I thought, it's
Yeah.
just kind of just, and I was reminded that with Gregory Peck and Arabesque. Sorry to keep bringing up a film you didn't watch, but it's what started it all. And it's like, wait, Gregory Peck is not Cary Grant, and that like I love Gregory Peck, yeah, one of the tops. But it's like, yeah, as a jokey wiseacre, it doesn't work. It's just not his shtick.
Well,
So
ironically, Alfred Hitchcock would agree with you.
yeah.
No, he was never crazy about using him in Spellbound.
Huh.
Um, he was far from his first choice. I mean, as an aside, Eva Marie Saint as Eve Kendall was about fourth or fifth down on his list. He was still trying to get Grace Kelly at that time to come out of retirement and be another Hitchcock blonde
Huh.
for Vera Miles had at that point in time gotten pregnant, so she wasn't going to be able to do it. And he had just met, if memory serve, I read a very good biography about Alfred Hitchcock by Donald Spoto, and he had just met Tippi Hedren,
Hmm.
but she was a commercial actress at that point in time. I,
Hmm.
I don't even know if she had a big screen credit. But by the time he got to Eva Marie Saint, he kind of had to be talked into it because all the other parts were coming together. He'd gotten his bad guy, Mason. Obviously, he loved working with Cary Grant and Martin Landau, who was a big surprise in the movie. He had managed to secure him. So it's like, am I really going to wait for another, blonde actress, or do I take somebody who's, well known because of On the Waterfront? So that's what he went with. But in terms of Hitchcock blondes, I would say Eva Marie Saint might be down at the bottom of the list, along with, unfortunately, Doris Day.
Huh.
Uh,
Where
you know,
was our good friend Janet Leigh at this point in time?
that's a very good question because wasn't the net, and I could look this up too, wasn't the next movie he made Psycho?
Pretty close. I mean,
Yeah,
isn't Psycho 1960?
I thought it was.
Yeah.
No, that's actually a very good point. I hadn't thought of that. I wonder what the holdup with her was. I
Hmm.
know Tony
Well,
Curtis.
okay, so you sort of dogged Eva Marie Saint because I have uh, On the Waterfront so indelibly burned it because I've seen On the Waterfront a number of times. It's one of
Same
those
here.
films I watched a lot as a kid because my parents had a VHS copy of it.
Mhm.
Uh, so with that sort of heartfelt sort of, you know, she's a goody goody in
Yeah,
that movie. So I
it
I
is.
was actually
Right.
pretty impressed with her cold sort of government agent, gun mall type perform. I actually thought she did a credible job. So
Okay.
when we get into comparisons, little sneak peek, everybody, I'm going with Eva Marie Saint. I liked her
Oh,
actually. I was
okay.
actually I didn't truthfully I didn't think when I saw what 20 years ago, 30 years ago, whenever I saw it, I
Mhm.
didn't I didn't remember, I barely remembered she was in it. So she didn't leave
Okay.
much of an impression the first time I saw it. And of course I knew she was, but this time around, knowing what you had told me, like you not liking her, I thought, yeah, I'm buying her. I'm buying her.
Oh, all right. I mean, I was just so impressed with, and again, this is all part of his obsession, because he started with Nova Pilbeam back in the silent, and then the first movies he made in England. Nova Pilbeam was his first Hitchcock blonde.
Hmm.
Uh, then he had before, oh God, Joan Fontaine. He had hired, and I will, Madeline Carroll, who was in, I believe, the 39 Steps and Number 17. And she was very good too. So you had this succession of very good, very strong actresses um, until you got to, where again, I think he sort of misstepped, but certainly not out of a lack of effort of putting Eva Marie Saint in the movie. But Hitchcock he was like Woody Allen. I mean, he was a production machine. He was cranking out a movie a year.
Yeah.
And the Spoto book was so outstanding because they broke it down into three segments, which was, he's prepping this, he's shooting this, and he's marketing this. And it had that almost treadmill feel to it, but that's what Hitchcock was like. And, not being able to get, one of his top four or five. I'm going to look into the Janet Leigh thing.
Also
I
look
think,
into Kim Novak because she
yeah,
was
Kim Novak
1950.
too.
She's 58,
Yeah.
and so like she could have easily done. I think she could have done His
Oh,
Partner Sleep for
I,
sure.
absolutely. I mean,
So
just as Carlotta in Vertigo, I mean,
yeah,
good God. I mean, she's the perfect Eve Kendall. That's also
yeah,
another good point. So
yeah.
there must have been something that was threatening to put the sand in the gears of the Hitchcock commercial filmmaking machine at that time. I'm going to go back and look at the book and see why he didn't get any of his top choices.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah,
Well, it's interesting.
it is.
What do you make of James Mason and the whole that plot? It's a little shadowy. Like, what? He's just an art dealer, or was this? What did he have? Who was he working for? Did I miss something?
No, I think you were probably taken in by the infamous, Hitchcock MacGuffin,
Yeah,
in that buried in one of those antiques or artifacts was
was
the
microfilm, right?
microfilm.
But we don't know who he's working for.
Yeah.
That's never. Yeah,
And it's just like at some point you just don't care.
right.
Which is it's the beauty of the MacGuffin. It's like
Yeah,
the nuclear byproduct in the wine bottles in the Ingrid Bergman Claude Rains vehicle, which slips has eluded me at this moment. I'll think of it. It was another good Hitchcock movie. But that was the classic MacGuffin, and quite frankly, North by Northwest was a pretty close second.
hmm. And it's your favorite Hitchcock film, more than Psycho.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's definitely again, when you think of the Hitchcock, you think of Psycho and you think of Frenzy and you think of the sort of small thrillers he made. This to me feels like his biggest film. Would you agree with that? Maybe
Uh,
Sabotage. It feels like his by far the biggest, most like like take Rear Window or Rope. Those are small films. This
uh,
is his biggest, most epic film. I feel.
well,
Do you
I
agree
think
with that?
Dave mentioned that early on,
Yeah,
like the sweep of the cinematography. I mean,
yeah.
yeah, absolutely.
Well, I was just thinking he never made another. Did he make another film like this? Because I'm not too versed in Hitchcock's films. He's not a favorite of mine.
Oh,
Even
okay.
though I respect it. I mean, especially just now I'm older and wiser and looking at it, I'm like, this really is a beautiful film. I mean, it's great. All the films have really strong visual interest, and almost like CG today, the use of matte paintings and models and
Mhm,
blue screen and all the things. It's kind of artificial, but it still looks really cool.
mhm.
You
Yeah,
know?
well, that's why he moved to America.
Yeah.
He moved in 1939 to make Rebecca because he wanted to work with the technicians over here.
Yeah.
He
Well, the
felt,
the UN matte painting looks really cool. Like, yeah, that's a matte painting, and
Oh, that
I
was a
just
matte that was a matte painting? I had no
oh
idea.
yeah, 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 yeah. But it's all very skillfully done. Like, I mean, it follows the visual motif of his film.
Yeah.
mhm.
So every like the all that I seriously doubt there was a single shot on Mount Rushmore.
Oh,
you know,
well,
but it
the
still
back
looks really good for what it is.
it does. They did shoot the back side of it, where
Okay.
they're in the forest, and they do the switch of the body when
Yeah.
Cary Grant is supposedly dead.
Right.
Yeah, that's behind the actual monument. But you're right. I mean, they weren't climbing down partially completed four presidents at that
Yeah.
alley.
Yeah, it looks the mats because a lot of matte paintings can look just like CG. It all depends on the skill level of the artists. They
Mhm.
look really good. I mean, I'm like, yeah, I'm convinced that they're there. It doesn't look fake. I
Right.
mean, it doesn't look slightly real, but I'm thinking for 1958 and 59 that they must have been just blown away,
Oh, sure.
because those are
Yeah.
great visual effects. They still are. Though I'm very
Yeah.
suspicious about a runway right next to Mount Rushmore.
Hey, there's a lot of open land out there.
It's like the mine cars in The Rock. Like, no, what the hell? Where do you think this is?
Fair.
Anyway, well, do we want to dig deeper into the meaning of it all, or should we move on? Dave, any thoughts about the psychology of it all?
No, I mean the only thing I mean I just love like North by Northwest. I just love the whole experience of it. So for me, it's just kind of an espionage movie for me.
Yeah.
Um, and then Charade, again, I don't think it's not done as well as North by Northwest, but the interaction and Audrey Hepburn, and I do like the bad guys in some of those. I mean,
Yeah.
just
James Coburn is really good.
yeah, James
And
Coburn.
George Kennedy.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those two were just awesome in it. But deeper meaning, I kind of just got sucked up in enjoying it. So I
Yeah.
didn't think on the deeper meaning on either
Well,
one.
like I've already said it, but I definitely felt like, okay, there's this sort of what's going on behind the curtain feel that's prevalent in the 60s because, Kennedy does get assassinated, and there, not that it was happening in 59, but it feels like at least Hitchcock saying, yeah, there's a lot more going on in our life than and now, we're living this now. So it just feels like, wow, this is interesting. This is the precursor to the paranoia that's going to hit in the 70s that we sort of clamped down on in the 80s, and it's not there as much. It's almost like in the 80s we got a lot of straightforward adventure, and then now it's almost cliche that the government's bad.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
But so I don't know. That I just found that aspect interesting. And I will say Charade, I felt like I had just recently watched, and Roseanne wants to do a podcast about it, is Thunderbolt and Lightfoot.
Oh, yeah.
And now I felt like, wow, so Thunderbolt and Lightfoot is Jeff Bridges and Clint Eastwood, but George Kennedy is the ringleader of a group of criminals that Clint Eastwood has worked with. So it almost felt like, hey, was Michael Cimino just kind of subconsciously copying Charade? Because here's George Kennedy again, as the sort of gruff, angry, impatient ringleader. Like pretty much the same part, except he doesn't have a hook in Thunderbolt and Lightfoot. So it just felt like, wait, I've seen this before. This sort of gang with, and James Coburn, you don't get better than him.
No.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I agree.
You greenhorn, you absolute rube.
I don't know the actor in North by Northwest, but the one that's kind of a little creepy looking, I thought he played a good bad guy. Not as good as James Coburn, but I don't know what his name was.
Marin
but I liked
Landau.
Martin. Is that who that was?
Yeah.
Okay.
You remember
sorry.
him?
I was confusing that name with Walter Matthau. Sorry.
Well, that is confusing.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah.
Martin Landau, Walter Matthau. Right. Yeah, but Martin Landau. Do you remember what he was on? And he got famous in the 70s briefly for Space 1999.
Right, with his wife Barbara Payne.
Yeah, and he and Leonard Nimoy were sort of trading parts, and he was up for Spock and all that. So he and Leonard Nimoy had the sort of tall, exotic Jewish looks that gave them sort of where they would play Indians and Native American, they would play like Apaches and all. So they were just sort of part of the studio system. So I think they were slugging it out for parts. And then, of course, obviously he became sort of a mini star after Ed Wood. If you remember, I don't know if you saw the movie Ed Wood.
Right, yeah, no.
But then he won Best Supporting Actor for that.
Yeah, for Lugos.
So then he started getting bigger parts.
He would fit in as a Vulcan. I could see him as a Vulcan.
Yeah. No, he was a great actor.
Yeah.
He died, right? I can't.
Yes.
He still,
yeah. Lived into his 90s.
No, he did. He was slugging away, working well into his 80s and all that.
Yeah. No,
but he was. I remember the Academy Awards. They cut him off. He was giving his acceptance speech, and they cut him off, and he screamed, "No!" no.
Oh.
The band started playing because he was thanking everybody, and they cut him off. But
Wow.
that's just I just hate when they do that. You cut off Susan Sarandon. You don't cut off Marin Landau or Fellini. They cut off Fellini one time.
Oh God. How much longer are these guys going to be around, right?
Yeah, I know. No, I mean, definitely they got to give the hook when people start getting political and start.
Oh.
Yeah, okay. All right, cut them off. Yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, let's move on, I suppose, into the technical aspects. So it's obvious. I mean, it's almost not worth bringing up because Carey Grant he's gray. He seems a little tired, but let's just go through it. Carey Grant in Charades or North by Northwest, or Charade or North by Northwest. George Young.
That's easy. North by Northwest. I really felt like he was in control of that part, and you can't take any scene he's in, even with Mason. I mean, and this is saying something.
Sure.
You are drawn to Carey Grant. I thought he was very, very strong in that movie and good in Charade, but certainly not up to the level of North by Northwest.
Yeah, he's almost like the reliable, trusty. Okay, let's just get Carey Grant because this is what he does in Charade, but he feels too old. Like he's just a shade.
No, that's a good
he's just
point.
a shade too old. Like nah. So then they go for Gregory Peck and again Arabesque. So I can see why they did it, but like but he's not Carey Grant. It's just he's kind of similar. They have when I was a kid, I actually used to confuse the two. Because they're both. Yeah, I'm talking little kid. My parents are always talking movies and watching movies, so I sort of had in my head that Carey Grant and Gregory Peck were kind of in the same mold, but they're obviously completely different. But looks wise, they have a certain look about them. It's just, again, leading men in that period were solid. Like they literally got guys who could fill the screen and hold it for in a movie no matter what crap they were doing. Which right. I just don't think we have that quality today. And I don't need to wax nostalgic because it's just true. And every bit as good an actor as anybody. I mean, are they as good as Daniel Day-Lewis? Probably not. They can't go into that nuance. But so what, right?
Yeah.
Dave, you said George said it.
Yeah, I mean, Cary Grant in North by Northwest. However, I will say yes, he looked tired. He was older in Charade, but I think he did a solid job. And I look at like Harrison Ford and how he's become in his later movies.
Sure.
I don't think Cary Grant was at that point in Charade for sure, but he could still do it. But it seemed it was I don't know what's a good word. Like in Charade, it just seemed like I've done this,
right.
how many times I can do this in my sleep. Whereas North by Northwest, it looked like he really had to work, in all those scenes and
that crop scene, that shot is no joke. I mean, it could have gone. It could have been a Vic Morrow. It could have very easily gone wrong. Yes. I mean, it's not pretty what he's doing. He's running from a plane that could miss the target and kill him.
His suit still looked pretty good. Yeah. I mean, that's the thing I noticed in that movie. I'm like, man, his suit looks freshly pressed, even though there's a little dust on it.
Yeah. You know what I do like though? The fact that they take the trouble to have it cleaned and
cleaned.
Pressed.
Yeah.
Because it does feel like, most movies just will skip it. And I go, well, hey, what happened to the suit? The next scene looks okay, or a few smudges or whatever. But this film at least goes to the trouble, like, oh, he has it cleaned and pressed.
Oh yeah, I mean,
and it works well. It works well within the plot, like because I get my big pet peeve is food. Like they sit down, they talk for a second, and then they leave. They get served, and then they leave. I mean, who does that? Nobody does that. Like nobody does that.
I agree.
Especially now, you're paying a fortune for a cheeseburger. So like nobody just leaves. Just cut the scene mid bite. You can. Someone in this table is a murderer. Oh, cut. Just why do they always leave? So at least this film attends to that detail. Mm-hmm. So Yeah. And I've
And
already said my piece.
even the shaving thing in this train station.
Oh, in the
Yeah.
charade.
Yeah, I mean he's shaving, right? And
Yeah.
even that's just like,
And with the
you
her
know,
teeny little
yeah,
razor
it's
too.
kind of, it's kind of funny, and it's like,
Yeah.
Yes,
they don't show that stuff really
Yeah.
in movies.
true.
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I like Hitchcock's slow burn style. I mean, that scene across the highway, like where just they're staring at the farmer, wondering if he's gonna be somebody bad or good. It's a good scene, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm more impressed with this film this time than I was 20 years ago for sure.
Okay.
And I have already answered the question. So let's dig in, George, since we've already had a minor disagreement. Eva Marie Saint or Audrey Hepburn?
Ugh. Well, okay. So here's what I was kind of playing with. That's what I was jotting down over here. What happens, just, humor me here, Gino. What happens if you swap them?
I I think that would have been better,
Yeah,
honestly.
because that's how I feel.
Yeah.
I was watching Audrey Hepburn and I went, I see her being able to pull North by Northwest off, and I also see Eva Marie Saint as a slightly better fit for the bored housewife, as you call her.
Yeah.
So that's kind of where I went with it. Now, who did I think did a better job in terms of performance? I probably would go with Audrey Hepburn only because I'm down on that, what do I want to call it? His backup to the backup to the backup of the really cool Hitchcock blonde. Again, he got like his fifth choice or something like that. So that was, I think, something that it's a pretty easy choice for me if you want to talk about leading ladies. I just think Hepburn was superior in
Well, she's superior in just she's like Angelina Jolie, right? You know, Angelina Jolie's a miserable actress. She just happens to be one of at her peak, she was one of the most beautiful women on earth.
Oh
So
yeah.
she just shows up and she looks great. Like so, Audrey Hepburn just has to show up, and she's got Eva Marie, and I like Eva Marie Saint. I always have
Oh
because
yeah, I do too.
I've always liked her, but she is sort of. When she showed up on Moonlighting as Sybil Shepherd's mom, yeah, that's the part she was born to play. Like, yeah, you are kind of the mom. There is something. So that's why I was sort of just shocked at how sexy she was in North by Northwest.
Oh yeah, right.
Yeah, because
Okay,
she does play Superman's mom, and she does play. As she got older, she sort of settled into that. And she always sort of had that in her from On the Waterfront, where it's like, yeah. So I thought it was a good departure from what I was used to from Eva Marie Saint.
okay.
But again, you can't. I still like Eva Marie Saint's effort more than Audrey Hepburn. Audrey Hepburn in Charade feels like she too is showing up for a paycheck in a sense, in my opinion.
All right.
Not that she is. That's kind of unfair. But she's definitely not playing to her strengths in that movie. I just don't quite buy her. She seems, as Dave said, she seems alternately too dumb and too sophisticated for the part.
Yeah, yeah, good comment.
Dave, thoughts?
Well, so I'm going on off topic. My favorite blonde in Hitchcock is Grace Kelly.
Oh,
In
sure.
um,
I'm Kim Novak all the way.
are you okay?
Yeah.
But I think as far as acting performances, I would probably have to give it to Eva Marie Saint.
Hmm.
Even though I love Audrey Hepburn, like
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and Cary Grant in it, but for me, I watched it because of Audrey Hepburn, Charade. That's what kept my interest. Just
Oh, wow.
They
Okay.
don't. Would you agree they don't quite have the
no,
chemistry they
no,
need? Like
yeah,
almost like maybe, not that I'd want to see him, but maybe Gregory Peck in North by Northwest or Gregory Peck in Charade might have worked.
Mhm.
You know,
Mhm.
take out the wisecracks because Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn and Roman Holiday obviously had
Oh yeah,
sizzling chemistry. I mean, they
they
just
did.
they just work together just naturally. They're like Spencer Tracy and Audrey Hepburn or
Mhm.
it's Catherine Hepburn. What am I saying? So
Mhm.
it just has that like some today I always think Jesse Eisenberg and what's her face, from Twilight. What's her name?
from
Twilight.
Twilight.
Kirsten, what's her face?
Stewart.
Kristen Stewart. Yeah.
Oh.
Jesse Eisenberg and Kristen Stewart have really good chemistry.
Oh, I
They're
remember
in two movies together. One of them's crappy. But I feel like Hollywood has lost that ability to pair the right people together like they used to.
Well, okay, yeah, and that's an interesting point. I had just seen Fly Me to the Moon, and I I really like Tatum,
Channing Tatum.
and I really like Scarlett Johansson. And they have, I don't know if either of you have seen the movie, but they've got absolutely nothing going on between there. They might as well be in two different movies.
Right.
Because there's no connection.
Right.
And
I see. Casting 101 says don't cast those two together.
Really?
Yeah,
No,
I would just.
Okay, why is that?
The reason why I didn't say it's because they are both very strange, hard, and again, chemistry is chemistry, right? I mean, they are sort of in their own. But like, I was looking at Somewhere in Time recently, just really to get off on a tangent. And here's Jane Seymour and Christopher Reeve, who are about as good as Gregory Peck and Audrey Hepburn. And then I've read, like, I was just looking at this dumb film, and we might even do a podcast about it because anyway, that's another tangent. But just looking at Christopher Reeve and Jane Seymour together, who I never loved, like, I like Christopher Reeve a lot because of Superman. But anyway, the fact of the matter is you find out they were actually in love. On that, they had an affair. I'm like, what?
No kidding.
But it shows in this movie because the movie is just kind of crappy and corny, but in a way good because their chemistry is fantastic. And anyway, blah blah blah.
Well,
but getting back to the films at hand, I don't think Cary Grant and Audrey Hepburn had remarkable chemistry.
I think there was more chemistry with Eva Marie Saint.
Yes, absolutely.
And well, yeah, but he was younger. I mean, maybe Audrey Hepburn's like, okay, you're getting old. I don't know.
No, it's only a few years. He's just at this point he's just grayer, but the face looks the same. I just think his effort was a little. He's just not quite there.
I think she tried. I mean, her part seemed. Of course, it's just the parts. The cast, the characters, but she seemed like she was trying her character, but I would say, to quote The Simpsons, it reeked of effort. She seemed... yeah, that's what I mean. She tried, but it just seemed like they just didn't work well together. I would say in this film, the contrivance of her not being frazzled to death her husband's dead. Okay, she's going through a divorce. Her husband's dead. She's got 4 goons chasing her. One of them is lying to her constantly. She seems a little frisky and on the prowl for a woman in her situation. So the film itself just naturally, compare that to Cary Grant. He's a debonair guy. It seems, wouldn't he be a little more Harrison Fordish and finger pointing, over just all the injustices done to him? But for some reason he pulls it off. Like, I don't know. I don't know why. Why do I believe Cary Grant in a similar situation? And I don't believe too bad Roseanne's not here because we could argue the sexism. Because I just buy Cary Grant as, he's kind of go with the flow, cool under pressure. He can do it. Whereas Audrey Hepburn, I think, this doesn't work. Do I need my women to just break down? But the fact that she's on the prowl just seems a little odd, given the plot.
Yeah.
And so, again, if you took Sophia Loren... I always believe Sophia Loren's on the prowl. It's one of her strengths. But seriously, I'm watching Arabesque. I'm going, I could reach in the screen and grab her. She just has that like luscious luminosity where you just go hubba hubba. And I could believe, and she just has that. That's why she was a star. You just look at her and go, and Audrey Hepburn just feels like she should be a little more reserved and that could be my typecasting because of Roman Holiday and how beautiful and innocent she is in that, but it just felt wrong to me. Like, I'm not quite buying this movie. I liked it. I liked it for James. I liked it for what's his face, Glass. And,
right.
I liked it for the little touches. I didn't like it overall. I thought overall it was a little saggy.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's all. So I'm surprised it was, because I've always heard about the film. So it's one of those films I'd always been meaning to see, and I
Sure.
was a little disappointed that it was such a big hit. So
Maybe 20, 30 years ago, you might have enjoyed it more. But again, level of sophistication, you're going to be looking at movies differently now than you would have, say,
I
I
don't
don't
buy that, George. Because look at North by
know.
Northwest.
All
Look
right.
at North by Northwest. It's just a much
Yeah,
stronger.
okay.
It's just a much good films hold up.
Yeah, no, fair
That's
point.
our whole thing on this podcast is we talk
Yeah,
about the films that are gonna last and
yeah.
why do they
Well,
last.
seeing that 60-year anniversary version of it on the big screen, I was just drawn right back into it.
Yeah,
The Lester Townsend's house out there in Glen Cove, Long Island, and the chase along Highway 1, even though, obviously that's being shot, in an effects studio.
yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
But still,
Still a very interesting chase.
yes,
You
it
know,
was.
the point of, his point of view is beyond the normal blue screen corn,
Hmm.
because I'm that's what I was noticing. Like, Hitchcock's angles are really good. Like, this
They
is,
are.
even though it's all blue screen, it looks fantastic when you have all those headlights heading to it. It's disorienting.
Yes, it is.
So, I mean, given the skills, I mean, just imagine what he could do today. So,
Oh,
you know,
wow.
with if he had the tools that we have today,
Sure.
but you
Sure.
wonder if he would just settle in and put out the same sort of look that everybody else is putting out. But anyway, let's not
Hard to
get into
say.
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um. All right. Well, so Cary Grant. Obviously, we agree. So who's the best villain? Who's the better villain of the two? James
Now,
Mason or Walter Matthau? George Young.
now this is a good question because I
Oh
thought
wait,
Mason.
spoilers. Walter Matthau's the bad guy. Sorry, everybody.
I am just, what should I say? What's the English? Gobsmacked at how good Walter Matthau is on screen. I mean, he's got a face like a roadmap, even as a younger man. And he just takes over. Like I said, I might have picked up on the fact that he was the bad guy earlier, maybe in an earlier screening of it. Um, and Mason, of course, is just so insidiously evil. I mean, I felt like Mason, very first time I saw the movie, he would kill if he really had to.
Hmm.
And that lethalness still came across again when Lee and I went to see it, the 60th anniversary screening. But I got to tell you, I just think Walter Matthau is such a wonderful actor, very American, that if I pulled an element out of the two movies where one I thought Charade was superior to North by Northwest, I do think Matthau was a better bad guy, despite the dopey shootout at the end of the movie.
Yeah, you got me set up for a really bad. I thought it was fine. I was completely fine with it.
Okay.
Um, yeah, I'd have to agree. You know what I like about young Walter Matthau, because what's the other film he's in where he's the detective and he
Charlie
gets,
Varick?
what's that?
Charlie Varick?
No, 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 no. Is it with Gregory Peck? I can't remember where he plays a detective and he's on the case and he gets killed. Anyway,
Oh,
but young Walter Matthau, I like him in those parts in the 50s and 60s before he becomes grumpy old man before he becomes Neil Simon Walter Matthau. So I like him sort of in those because he is really effective and he
yes.
is pretty kind of creepy once when it gets down to it.
Yeah,
You
sure.
know, I mean, I knew it was coming that he was the bad guy just because osmosis. So I knew it was. But even I'm taking myself out of foreknowledge. I'm like, yeah, he's a great bad guy. I'm gonna say much better than James Mason because James Mason doesn't quite resonate like
Oh,
Walter
okay.
Matthau.
Well,
I guess the twist is better for Walter Matthau, and James Mason is sort of obviously the bad guy, but he's not a very well-rounded bad guy in my opinion.
Okay.
I mean, yeah, I'm just saying that. Like, I think Walter Matthau, all his motivations come full circle, whereas James Mason, he's supposed to be shadowy. I get it, but I'm not quite sold on his whole story arc.
All right.
Dave, thoughts?
So out of those two, I like James Mason a little better.
Mm,
Um, Maybe because Walter Matthau, I just can't get him out of my head from TV.
mm.
Old Walter Matthau,
Well, he's
right?
not on what TV?
Wait,
He's never.
wasn't he? What was the TV? Wasn't he on a TV show?
No,
What
he's
was the
bad.
movie?
The things you're thinking about with Walter Matthau, where he becomes sort of rah, rah,
Yeah,
Walter
yeah,
Matthau.
okay.
It's Bad News Bears.
Okay,
It's
yeah.
it's
Okay,
gr-
yeah,
it's
okay,
it's
okay.
The Odd Couple, of course.
Okay,
That's his
The Odd
most.
Couple. Yeah,
That's his
yeah.
most.
That's what I,
But he's not on TV. That's Jack
okay.
Klugman. You're thinking
Okay.
Jack Klugman and Tony
Okay.
Randall, but the original movie is Jack Lemmon and Walter Matthau.
That's right. That's right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So anyway, I think Walter Matthau was great. I didn't like the as was mentioned earlier was the shootout. I thought was a little too much for me at the end with
Hmm.
Walter.
Eh.
And but I like
But
James
wait,
Mason
can I
better.
just stop the presses on both of you? Movies now are so dumb. I like in the 50s and 60s that they're not that big a deal. It's not this huge thing where they end up at the top of a building, and even the Mount Rushmore chase is basically pretty cut and dry. A little knife, a guy falls, but it's not this giant, endless, boring climax. There's a few guns fired, and that's it. And so
Okay.
I like that. I like, yeah. Do we always have to have this endless chase? So it's short and sweet. Yeah, they fire some guns. Some people get shot. It doesn't
But
have that feel.
but James Mason feels more, um, as George said earlier, more evil to
Yeah.
me than Walter Matthau. That's I think why I would pick him.
But his motivations to me are just a little like, I'm not
But
quite
do we know what his
understanding.
motivations are though?
No.
Yeah. See,
I don't
that's
know who he's working for.
yeah. See,
But
that's
Walter Matthau, it's very clear. We learn at the end to look at exactly what he is. He's the guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He's what's his name? The,
Kyle.
Niall.
yeah. So
Yeah.
he's his brother. So that's it. Like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
So he's the
Yeah, that's
mastermind
fair
behind
enough.
it all.
Yeah.
So anyway, but I think Walter Matthau just has that quality, that everyman quality that makes it more sinister.
Mhm.
Maybe
You
more
know.
believable.
Yeah.
I mean, to average
Good way to
people.
put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
All right. Well,
We got to talk about henchmen, though.
Oh, do we? Okay.
No,
Go
I mean,
henchman.
yeah.
Sure. Who's your favorite henchman?
Um, I kind of sorry, the guy from North by Northwest. What's
Martin Landau.
Martin Landau?
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, he's great.
yeah,
Yeah.
he was my
And
favorite.
he's a precursor to all the sort of vaguely gay henchmen. that sort of comes up like, oh, aren't you? James Mason gives him that line. I forgot what it was, but I'm like, that's funny. Like they're touching on all these things that happen like in No Way Out and ad nauseum, where it's the guy who's devoted to the bad guy in almost sort of like homosexual ways. Like,
Right,
that's
yeah.
funny. I just overlooked all this stuff. It's a fairly sophisticated. Not even again. I sound so condescending. It's a sophisticated script, and I took it for granted. Again, Ernest Lehman, he could write, so I took it for granted. So yeah, I definitely. I don't know. It's tough for me. I'll let George, but I'll just say it. Then I'll let you talk, George. I just love James Coburn. Speaking of vaguely gay, I love James Coburn. No, he just when he gives that "you're a rube, you're a tin horn" speech, I just like classic James Coburn.
Oh,
So
yeah.
that's my choice. But George, go ahead. Who do you got? Best henchman.
Well, I have to say the two Nazis who escort Cary Grant out of the Oak Room were pretty effective.
Yeah.
And if you're going to look at, like strictly the crew, the henchman crew, I did think that was a nice touch. Although, you do have to suspend disbelief that somebody's going to stand in the doorway of the United Nations cafeteria Full on two rubber gloves.
Yeah. Well, it's the 60s. What did people
Yeah.
know?
But yeah, I really like those guys, as understated as they were. But all in all, you've got a pretty good team of bad guys, I guess, if you want to call them that, in
Yeah.
Northwest. Uh, the charade guys, yeah, those are what, three of my favorite character actors on the planet.
Yeah.
Coburn, George Kennedy, and
Ned Glass.
Ned Glass.
Yeah.
Geez. So I don't know. I'm gonna have to come out and say that's a tie as far as I'm concerned.
That's a no-no on this show.
No,
You can't tie Nazi with a gun to your head.
hold on. All right, I'm gonna go with the team from Charade.
Wow. Wow. Over
Yeah.
Martin Landau? Martin Landau's pretty impressive for sure.
Well, yeah, and if he wasn't nominated, he should have been.
Yeah.
But I just, that collection, that's like, pulling Hall of Fame character actors out to fill parts like that. So very compelling, especially since eventually you figure out, oh, they're all tied to the bad guy, Walter Matthau, on some level, obviously.
We gotta give a special mention to Jessie Royce Landis, though. She's a great mother, even though
Oh,
she's only
oh,
she gets a Sean Connery award for being what 6 years older than Cary Grant.
yeah, three. Actually, it's three.
Is it really?
Yeah, she's only 3 years older than him. And of course,
But she's fantastic.
she's unbelievable, especially in
Yeah,
that courtroom scene where
yeah.
he's being defended by Ed, the guy who played Maxwell Smart's boss in Get Smart.
Oh, right. That's where I'd seen him.
I can't remember the actor's
Yeah,
name. He's just outstanding. And
yeah,
just Royce Landis is a wonderful actress. She's been in a bunch of stuff, and she's always very, very good.
yeah. No, very enjoyable. All right, gents, we're gonna go into my favorite, but this time
Oh,
this is heavy duty. Come on, George. You're
uh,
talking about Henry Mancini versus Bernard Herrmann. You're talking about two. Even
yeah,
you can appreciate their greatness,
you
and
bet.
I gotta give it to my man Bernard Herrmann. This is a great score. Like I was never familiar with it until this past viewing, and I'm thinking, okay, this is a terrific score, and now I know why people love Bernard Herrmann.
Yeah.
Dave, did you think about the music? Did you
Yeah,
notice? I mean, and Henry Mancini is awesome.
I
Pink
mean,
Panther.
I like the music from North by Northwest.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, and that's not Henry Mancini, right?
No, that's Bernard Herrmann,
Yeah, Bernard Herrmann. Yeah, that's what
who
I
did
thought.
Psycho. I mean, he
Yeah.
was one of the pros. He was the John Williams of his day,
Yes,
and
it was.
But I was like, okay, this is a great score, and again, really noticeable in and again, that's supposedly the when a composer does a bad job and you notice the score, but I just thought the music was terrific in that chase scene on the highway
Oh,
where
yeah.
when he's
Yeah.
drunk. I thought, boy, this is really good. It's really a great like propulsive score, So okay, so yeah, everybody's going with Bernard Herrmann. George,
Yeah.
did I give you a chance to talk? No, I didn't.
I'm just gonna third everything because yes, of course. I just thought the score for North by Northwest just made everything even that much better. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Henry Mancini wrote the Pink Panther.
of
The
course.
score, to Charade is really good. Breakfast at Tiffany. I mean, he's great composer. It just no Bernard Herrmann. It's too bad, but they definitely two like this. I'd say the score to Charade was really really good. It just didn't measure up. Okay, let's go cinematography. Let me before we. I'll cut this out, but we have to look them up. Hold on.
Oh,
We know that Toyota rolls deep for football, but do you know just how deep?
oh God.
Who was that? Was that me?
No, that's my phone. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah. Let me turn the volume down.
All right.
I met Will Patton one time, the guy who was the slightly
Yeah, North by Northwest. Yeah. How
oh
was he?
no, the Gene Hackman.
I'm sorry. No Way Out. Yeah.
Well, yeah, I met him because I worked on Sweet November with Pat Connor, and Pat Connor had done the oh, what was it? The something sisters with Jennifer Connelly when Jennifer was very young, and I'm trying to Will Patton played like the four girls' father or something like that. I gotta find the movie. But I asked Pat about Will Patton, and he said Will Patton is an ordained minister.
Oh, really? He
Yeah,
seems like that.
yeah.
You know, he was up for Han Solo.
No.
Yeah.
Well, he's a very good actor. Pat Connor raved about.
Oh, yeah, charades. All right, so Robert Burke versus... Okay, Charles Lang Jr.
Hmm.
Okay, so Robert Burke versus... All right, so this part will have to be cut because I had to look them up. I really have to do that beforehand from now on. So Robert Burke versus Charles... So
Wait,
Charles... Robert Burke
Charade?
did... No, he did North by Northwest.
Okay.
Yeah, versus Charles B. Lang Jr. So, Dave, give it a shot. Who's cinematography?
Robert Burke. I
Yeah.
mean, North by Northwest. Yeah, there's no comparison for me.
Sure.
So
Fine. Dave or George?
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Just exactly what you were talking about, Gino. I mean, did Hitchcock direct a film as epic as ever, after North by Northwest? The only thing I can think of it was Topaz, which is not a
I've never seen that. I've never seen it.
It's not a very good movie, but there are some shots in both Harlem and I forgot. I think it might have been the Dominican Republic that doubled for Cuba.
Huh.
And the cinematography from that movie is actually quite good. I don't know who his cinematographer was. He did use Robert Burke's more than once. I know that.
No. I guess we can get into editing and all that, but I guess the last thing is, and we've pretty much discussed it, but Stanley Donen versus Alfred Hitchcock. Stanley Donen's no slouch. The only time he's a slouch is when Stanley Donen becomes a slouch in the 70s and 80s when he makes what did he make? He made Saturn III with Kirk Douglas and Farrah Fawcett, and then he made Blame It on Rio. He ended with Blame It on Rio, which is one of the worst, most disgusting films of all time. You can't get a more sleazy film.
Yeah, I mean,
so he went out like Stanley Kubrick, like holy cow. So the guy who did Singing in the Rain ended with Blame It on Rio.
I can't believe he did those Singing in the Rain. And then ended on Blame It on Rio.
Yeah, no, it's a bad look. It's an old Hollywood pervert.
Oh my God. Yeah, you want to arrest Michael Caine for pedophilia.
Oh, Michael Caine's so stupid. I love Michael Caine, but he's a lunkhead. I have it as his autobiography, and he's like no qualms whatsoever about it. Yeah, no. He's like, I made a mint. All he cared about was his whole autobiography is money. Like, boy, he says, "What's it all about?" Yeah, it's money. It's all he cares about. Like, yeah, I did Jaws 4, but I got a plane and a new house in the Bahamas. It's all he cares about.
That's disappointing.
Yeah, but anyway, so yeah, I'd say Hitchcock for sure. But Stanley Donen, great director at one point.
Yeah.
Yep. All right. Well, would you recommend both films, David Johnson?
Yeah, I would. I mean, North by Northwest for me is an A+.
What do you give Charades?
I'd give Charade probably an A-.
Oh, that high?
Because Audrey's in it.
Really?
Yeah. Even though it's not her best role, it's still, yeah. I mean, because a B+ movie, I mean, I'm trying to think of a B+ movies for me.
I'm actually giving it a B-.
Really?
Yeah. Charades, no, it's a B-. It's not in A territory for sure. And it's not maybe not solid B because I just didn't love it. In the end I thought, good writing, snappy patter and all that, but it's nowhere near North by Northwest is an A for sure. George, do you need to expound on this, or have I said it?
No, you're right. But I do think Charade is a good solid B, and yes, I would recommend both movies for anybody who's even remotely interested in the history of filmmaking in America. I mean, come on.
Well, again, I've cataloged why I slight marks off for the chemistry not being there.
Yeah,
And that, to me, that's,
you're right.
again, I brought up my Somewhere in Time analogy. It's like, that's a dumb movie with great chemistry. There's a reason why it works. It's because the stars are great together. And that has to be, to me, that has to be the case. When you put a man and woman together in a movie, you have to have chemistry. Most movies don't at all anymore, I think, because men and women are terrified to even talk to each other. So we don't have good just chemistry. I just keep seeing this, like, yeah, the chemistry, like you said about this Fly Me to the Moon. I just find that most of the time I don't care about the actors getting together. You know,
Yeah, right.
I will give you your I forgot the name of it. Anybody But You. I will give you those two had chemistry. Was it Anyone But You?
What's that?
What the hell's her name? She's all the rage. The guy who was just in the Twisters movie.
Glenn Powell and Sydney
Sweeney. Yeah.
Sweeney. Yeah.
They have chemistry. It's just a repulsive movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, right. Well,
but it's rare that you have people with chemistry at this point. Like they rarely make movies. Anyway, I've already gone on that rant. So yeah, that's why I give a B- to Charades. I just don't think the chemistry is quite there.
mm-hmm. Okay,
So
that's fair.
Entertaining, but nothing great. Is how I see it. B-.
Maybe I'll drop mine to a B+.
Ooh,
Yeah.
Okay. I talked you into it, Dave?
Yeah, I mean, we talked about all these points. I mean, I brought up some of the points.
Yeah.
It's just classic. I just love the 60s vibe.
Yeah, me too.
And so for me, it's like I watched it just out of enjoyment and just, I don't know, got sucked up. Yeah, I would recommend them both. I mean, definitely North by Northwest, but yeah, Charade, it's a good movie. I enjoyed it. I'd watch it again. But
Okay.
I think in a few years I could, again, based on, as you say, the luminescent Audrey Hepburn, I could see just wanting to see her again, even though I thought, as I said, slightly miscast. But yeah, I could see watching it again. I wouldn't be against the idea, for sure.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. But then again, as you say, the 60s vibe. I could see Arabesque again just to study. I love Gregory Peck so much and Sophia Loren. I could study that film just to see where it went wrong because I enjoyed it. Even though I thought it was a mishmash of a story. Like, whoa, this story makes no sense. I can't even follow the script. I have no idea what's happening in a sense, but I don't think you're supposed to. It's pure MacGuffin. It's like one of those films that's pure MacGuffin and thinks it can get, like most movies today are all pure MacGuffin. Like, do you care? Do you care what's happening in your story? Because it's just falling apart as the more we go along, So to sum up, North by Northwest is a time when the screenplays were great,
Mm-hmm.
Great screenplay, great dialogue, great. I mean, maybe the shadowy thing I didn't quite agree with, but it doesn't matter because the rest of the elements are pulling it along.
Yeah.
I would definitely recommend North by Northwest. Charade, if it's a rainy Sunday afternoon and you got nothing going on. That's how I see it. But North by Northwest is a must.
Yep. Oh God, yeah. No argument here.
All right. Well, I can't say for sure to you and to all my fabulous listeners out there. I think we're going to try and tackle Megalopolis next. So
Wow.
if you have the guts. So I think that's the deal.
Woo! All right.
All right. Well, thanks for joining me, gentlemen. Thanks for
enjoyed
listening
it.
out, all you fans out there. All 330 of you, whatever, however many there are. But,
Well, thank you for indulging me, Gino.
No, I'm glad we
no,
watched.
George, these were good picks. I like these picks.
Oh, good. Okay.
Yeah.
All right, gents. Thanks a million.
Thanks.
And have
Thank you.
a great week. And
You
all
too.
you listeners out there, like and subscribe on whatever. I'm told to say that. Okay.
Yes. Take
Bye.
care, everybody.
Thank you for listening to Fabulous Film and Friends. Copyright 2024, a Bel Air Films production.